Hello, I forgot to hit play. I will recap. For the benefit of posterity. Today we are doing an exercise where we are making a calculator in Windows Forms. The students are right now working on putting all of the buttons in their Windows Forms things. Let me see here. See, right there, let me see here. One of those. There we go. I used to have TAs to do the camera work. So, please get started on that. We'll take, 10, 15 minutes should be enough to lay out some buttons. Perhaps even less. I'm going to work on it while you guys are working on it. Remember that you edit the button text by right-clicking, going to Properties, and then changing the value of the text parameter. resist setting the font to Comic Sans. There we go. Oh yeah! Comic Sans calculator. Mission accomplished. Okay, mission accomplished, good. Getting there, that's good. Very good. Hello. Yeah, come on in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right now we're working on a we're implementing a calculator.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. so-
That's cool. I'm sure that's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so.
I'm sure they'll find it interesting.
So-
I'm sure.
Sorry,
You know,
your
I'm
name?
just Isa. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I just put my name over there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still have to do my second. Yeah.
This is my second one.
So, as part of the college education development program, which is a thing they make new hires do for a couple of years, we have to go and observe each other's classrooms. So, I would like to introduce Isa.
Yeah,
Who
nice
is-
to meet you guys. Hi.
Yeah.
Don't mind me. Pretend
Where-
I don't, I'm not here.
Where do you hail from? What program?
Well, math and stats.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So you're all about the calculators.
Yo, boring. By the way, can I have a quick chat with you outside for 2 seconds?
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
So, shall we move into giving these buttons some functionality then? Good. So, as we learned last class, double-clicking on any of these buttons inside of the interface automatically creates an event method tied to the button's click. These are configurable for the different types of actions you can take. But of course, the basic thing that you do with a button is you click it. Occasionally, you might have to do something for hover, but you know, so it goes. Once we've made our events, though, the question then remains: how do we program this thing to behave realistically like a calculator? Right? So, in order to understand that, we have to think about how it is the calculator actually behaves. So, in terms of, if we consider the output here, the output of the calculator, on a real calculator, it's both output and input, right? That's your display area, but it's also showing you what you're inputting, right? Which is still a form of output, but so it goes. So if we have a variable here, keeping track of like what is going on with the screen, maybe call that variable screen, right? In the first place, do you think that it makes sense to make screen a there are two data types that one might imagine fitting this variable? Any guesses? Yes? String, yep. Screen could definitely be a string. What else could it be?
Could be a float.
Could be a float. That's right. Now you'll notice that I haven't when I gave you the buttons for the calculator, I didn't actually include a decimal place. But we can still get floating point values out of this thing. Anybody care to guess how? Yes, by use of the division operator. Very good. So, in technical point of fact, it doesn't actually matter which of the two of these you choose. Some operations become a bit easier, some operations become a bit harder, right? And that's, you know, sometimes you do have the choice. So what do you think, gang? Should we go with strings or floats?
I think if we're gonna put what we're typing in, it should be a string.
Right. So your vote is string. Everybody in favor of string? Everyone in favor of float? Oh, wow. That is a failure of the democratic process if I've ever seen it. Let's go with string because that was said first. Arbitrarily decide that. So let's think for a moment about how a calculator's display behaves when the buttons are pressed. Keeping in mind that we're keeping the status of the screen as a string. Something like that. So, let's say I have in my calculator the value 10,000, right? What happens if I push the 3 button? What do I get? It's okay to pull out your calculator and try it if you want. If this is my value, and I press 3, what does this value become? Well, it's already 10,000, right? You add another digit, so it becomes 100,003. Yeah. Oh, I thought you said 10,000. Oh, pardon me. So, if you take 10,000 and you have a 3 crest, you add another digit at the back, pushes the whole number forward. Not a difficult thing to calculate, but even simpler as a string operation. What is this as a string operation? What's the name for it? Sounds a bit feline. Starts with the letter C. Concatenation. That's right, good, concatenation. So if you take this string and that string, and actually in C# if you just use the plus sign, there we go, that yields the new number, right? So long as the data type underlying is string. If the data type underlying was not string, what would we have to do? Come on guys, you're killing me. I know it's Friday morning, but come on. What numerical operation do we perform to get from here to there? I might have to bust you guys back to elementary school.
Addition, right?
Hey, what?
We're doing the addition, right?
We're doing the what?
Addition.
Addition. Yes, we're doing addition,
Yeah.
but we're doing one other thing too. Count the place values.
Plus equals.
That's addition. Okay, seriously? Actually, we're not going forward until you get this, because this is so stupidly easy. Come on. What's the difference between this number and this number? What do you do to get from here to here? Come on.
Add another 0. Like,
And what does add another 0 mean in mathematics? Multiply by 10. Thank you. So you take the existing value, you multiply it by 10, and then you add the digit that you're adding. All right? That's how you would do it if you were working with the numbers, right? But in our case, we're working with string data. So, let's take a look now at our code. Let's take a look at, there we go. So, at this point, we run into a bit of an issue, right? When we start taking a look at the actual code. If I double click on the 1 button, you will see that inside of form1.cs, the method which is created says button 9 click. Now, obviously this is a button labeled 1, not a button labeled 9, so does anybody know where that 9 is coming from? Guesses are okay. Yes?
When we added the buttons, it was the 9 button.
Precisely so. This is the order that we added the buttons to the app. It is not representative of what the label text of the button that we arbitrarily assigned is. So, this is not useful, right? This is not a useful way of naming our elements, right? We should rename our elements, right? Because, like, for our particular application, this is not only wrong but confusing, right? So, in our Solution Explorer, you have form1.designer.cx. Scrolling to the bottom of this, you will see that all of the components that we added to the Windows form are given here as private variables or attributes of the class, right? So, our objective is to relabel these variables in terms of their correct buttons, right? Let's do one to start off with, and then you guys can work on the rest, okay? So, let's take a look. I personally remember that the first button I added was the 7, right? But you can also go in to the Properties window, and you'll notice that the value given right underneath the Properties window itself, like the title there, is the name of the button as given, right? So that's the way that you can find which of these buttons are labeled what, right? So if we go into our form designer, button 1 was 7. Now, I'd like to give you some assistance with your naming conventions here. So, there can be a tendency to pick bad names for these things, right? You might be inclined to say, well, button 1 is just 7, so I'm just going to declare it as button 7, right? Or private button 7, right? Within the context of form1.designer.cx, this is not necessarily a problem because the word button occurs adjacent to the word 7. We can always tell that the variable 7 is of type button because it's right there in the declaration, right? But once we start pulling that into other pieces of code, the typing information is no longer right there explicitly in the code, right? So it's very easy to lose track of what type of form element that is, right? And that's something that really actually does matter. So, this is my gift to you, a naming convention. When you are creating a button, it is useful to put a prefix on it indicating what type of form element it is. So in this case, I've chosen the abbreviation BTN to represent a button. You can come up with these short abbreviations for any of the form elements that we've been talking about so far. TB for text box, LB for label, CB for checkbox, RB for radio button, right? You can come up with all of these prefixes. If you apply these prefixes consistently, it'll make your code much more readable and workable, right? And when I say code must be readable, I'm not talking about code being readable to, whoever it is you're working with on the project. I'm talking about you 3 days from now, right? Like, Trust me, I've been a programmer for a long time. As a human being, I consider my memory to be reasonably good. But ask me to tell you something about a piece of code I wrote a week ago. I would have to look at it. Right? So you should always, always, always write your code as if, future you from the future had to read it. Alright? Make sense? So far, so good? Good. Question?
We name them according to what they are, right? Because like if it's button, then it's button, right? We cannot choose any other names if it's button.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it. Like you can, you are capable of naming it whatever you want. If you wanted to, you can name all of your buttons after all of the provinces of Canada, right? The question is, does that tell you anything about the program, right? So if you're particularly if you're using some kind of scheme like this, but you're mislabeling text boxes as check boxes, you are actively destroying reason and readability. You are taking arms against rationality, right? So, does that make sense? Yeah. I know it's people sometimes say ooh, programming is a creative field, right? You sometimes hear this. Programming is creative. It's yes and no. At some level, sure, you are, creating novel algorithms most of the time, right? But on the other hand, you're not, it's bad for you to take liberties, with things like naming conventions, right? Your code should be boring to read to an extent. The novelty should be in the way the code is structured to achieve the outcome as efficiently as possible, right? But yeah, it's not creative in a creative writing sense. So, let's relabel button number 1 to BTN7. Actually, so the naming conventions for variables, the first character of a variable name must not be a number, but you're permitted to use numbers inside of the variables, right? By the way, you're going to have a series of things which are all labeled with a series of increasing numbers. What does that make you want to do? It wants you to make a data structure. You should, if you were doing this just purely on your own, this would be a good place to use an array, right, to contain all of these button references. However, I'm not precisely sure that Windows Forms would play nice with me if I altered it to that degree, so I'm just going to leave it. A good skill is also knowing when to leave well enough alone. So, yes. So, we have changed a name, but even worse, we have changed a name with something that has already been linked to a callback function. So, basically, we just have to fix the error, right? Button 1 does not exist in the current context. So, if you go to the error, right? You've got all of these errors here. If you click the name button 1 does not exist in the current context, this is true. We changed the name. What did we change it to? Button 7. That's right. So, button 7. There we go. If we save that, basically everywhere you see button 1, you need to replace it for button 7. Yes?
Would it not just be faster to use the rename function?
To use the which?
The rename function?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see here. Where do you get that? Where's the, oh yeah, it's right here. Yes, but it's also useful to see how to get yourself out of this situation. So, as a programmer, find and replace is your best friend, right? Human beings are not your friends. Find and replace is your only friend. So, if you hit Control H, you can find button 1, there we go, and replace it with the name that you changed it to. Replace. There we go. And now, there we go, we've got one more version. Button 7, there you go. All compiler errors are finished. And when you hit the screen, you should close it if all of your errors are finished, and go back to view, and Form Designer should be in here. Double clicking on form.1.cs works as well. So there you have it. So that's how you do it the manual way by editing the code. Yes. So there were a few buttons called like button 10, button 11, right? So you have replaced all of those as well. That's why you have button 70, 71, 72. So just place it, just walk it back. Until you are back to there. And try putting a period after it. Right? Now you're just targeting that one. Yeah. So, I should say one thing about find and replace. Find and replace all is usually not your friend. Sorry, where did you name those?
Like money?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's the hard way. It's good to know how to get yourself out of a jam, huh? A somewhat easier way of doing it. So, up here, you have a drop-down menu of all of the components, all of the variables that you have in this project. You'll see button 7 is there as well. So let me just grab 8. 8 is button 2. There we go. You can also go button 2, rename, or right click. There we go. If you right click on the name itself, you can use one of Visual Studio's automatic code refactoring tools to perform all of these modifications for you. It is rename, which is also mapped to Control R. So in this case, this is button 8, and you will see rename will update 10 references in one file. There you go. Press enter. And you can see that the modifications have been made anywhere they occur. So, make sense? So all that does is what we did for button 7, but it applies those changes automatically, right? But what that does is what we did the first time. So, why don't we take 5 minutes, update these button references to make to say something that makes sense, and then we will continue on from there. Okay? Question? Oh yeah, that's because that's previews the change instead of actually making the change. Yep. Well, does button 2 exist? Nope. So in this case, it didn't go through here all the way, so you'll have to use the other method. Yeah. You can also just change it manually, but one thing to keep in mind, if you're doing a find and replace operation, try to make sure that you get only that amount that's, because like, it's more of an issue with button 1, but if you just said button 1, it would grab this portion of button 10 as well, right? So that can throw you off, but yeah, like the other way you can just do it is you can just like, if you just click on each of the errors and fix it, that also works. Yeah, and that way you don't miss anything. So, the click property binds it's like adding an event listener, but it's like a list of the event listeners for that button. So if you go to form.cs, button 6 click is there, and that's basically button 6 click. Oh, it's bound to this one. So this one you could probably list. So you have to fix your errors first.
But I want to see like lots of different numbers.
Right. Well, let's see what we got here. Well, if you fix those, hopefully that'll clear the errors, and then you just double click on form1.cs, and that will bring your form back up. Sound good? nice big buttons for accessibility.
And works.
Yeah.
I even used the bigger text box.
And you have a space between your operator buttons and your numpad. Very good.
What was the, maybe put it in the email, but I don't remember you responding to it. I'm usually going to.
Oh. Q-wing. So it's up. You know where F-wing is? Yes. So you go down that hall and then turn to the left at the end of the hall, go out of the building. There will be a portable building called Q-wing. That's where my office is, and the office is all the rest of the people. And if you ask at reception, they will, or if nobody's there because everybody was just fired, just ding the bell and I'll come because I'm expecting you at 11. So,
Yeah, I'll probably do that. I mean, I gotta walk there and stuff. I'm gonna have time to grab a drink, but I will be there shortly.
Sure.
We get it.
Yeah. So the other thing is because you're going to start writing at 11, you'll be done at 1-ish. Assuming you don't complete it earlier than that, of course. I don't mind if you bring a sandwich.
I mean, I have a little break after, like, civic classes stuff.
I just, with that, if that would have been helpful.
Yeah, fair enough.
I had a friend in university who brought a peanut butter sandwich to every exam, and he swore that was the reason. Well,
I mean, I'm not too worried about the tests, I think even if I get a 0, I'm still saying.
yeah. This particular friend also thought he could control the letters.
With the peanut butter sandwich?
Not with the peanut butter sandwich, no, but he thought he could control the letters, so.
Depending on which kind of sandwich you need that day.
Yeah. No, he had a series of complicated hand gestures that the universe was paying attention to, I guess. So.
Have you watched How I Met Your Mother?
Me? No, I haven't.
What the main character tries to control the writing with like a traditional African dance.
Yeah. Different form of weapon control in this case. How's it going? Got it all done?
Yeah.
Very good. Did you get it all done?
Yeah.
Awesome. You have to close it. Sorry. How are you? Okay. And while you guys are finishing up that, I'll do this so that we're all on the same page.
Who is that? Professor. No, it's not. Professor X. It's Professor Oh, same face. Same face.
Oh. Oh, that's unfortunate. The one exception to that, of course, is like, if I'm fired, I'm not doing your test.
It's funny.
You'll have to find, I left it on my desk, you can
If
find
you're
something.
fired, I feel like we all automatically pass this course.
I mean, yeah, I mean, pretty effectively, yeah. Oh, by the way, on the subject of the strike, there was some communication that came down from on high recently that, like, both parties have agreed to arbitration occurring in early December. So the rumor that was going around that the strike is unlikely this semester seems to be panning out. So, that's good for the existence of exams.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That would have been a total disaster with everything going on.
Yeah. Well, seems to be that kind of a semester.
I believe it's going to be that kind of a year, moving 2025, 2026.
Well,
Guys, do not panic, it's okay.
yeah. Well, regardless, it is probable that the Earth will still be spinning.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe some new amendment to the policy on global warming says that it's gonna also stop the Earth spinning.
See ya. Bye, guys. Good luck.
Take her easy. Okay. So, now that we have all of our buttons relabeled, we've got the functionality to talk about. So, in terms of how the data is handled, right? We need to think about, well, let's do the easy one first. Let's get number construction and clearing operating, right? That's sort of the easiest thing to do first. So, while it might be your inclination to work purely with the string label to the text box, my advice to you is that it becomes easier later on if you store the state of the screen in a separate variable rather than relying purely on the property of the text box to hold the value for you. Okay? So, let's make a variable for it. We'll have to do that in the same place that we are writing all of our action methods. That will be form1.cs. So, let's make a string variable. String, let's call it display, initially empty. We can also, it's going to cause an error, but if you had created these action events previously, they are mislabeled, so you should delete them. This is going to cause issues, however, inside of formdesigner.cs. So the way that these action methods get applied to the form elements is via lines like this one on line 148. Button1.click plus equals button9_click. So button.click is a reference to all of the click events that are running on the button. And you can see that you can guess that there is the possibility of having more than one, given that this is plus equals and not just straight equals. So this line must be terminated. There we go. And this one as well. So go through and delete any of those that you might have kicking around, right? They are mislabeled. Now that we've relabeled our form elements, it should be much nicer to work with. So, going back to Form Designer, if we click on one, you can see that the name of the action which is produced is now button1click, which, you know, is obviously much more correct than button9click, right? Make sense? So far so good? So if you haven't done so already, please take a moment and expunge any leftover meaningless methods you may have introduced accidentally by double-clicking, because that's a very easy thing to do in Visual Studio Windows Form Designer. Oh, and without saving it?
Yeah.
Oh. So what are you going to do this time?
So,
You're going to save it this time.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Form Designer, and like there'll be one error that's introduced. Double click, delete that one. That's it. You were very conservative with your steps. You didn't have a million actions that you need to delete. It's good. By the way, is this more fun than deleting? What, in Unity? Yeah. You know, see. Well, it kind of was. Like, I'm trying to give you the stuff that's going to be useful and serve you well for the program, because like making video games is fun, but it's a dead end in terms of curriculum. So I've been trying to focus on the stuff that'll be useful. So I understand that makes it less fun, but, I mean, if you're interested in making video games, you can always join my video game development club that I run Fridays from 2 to 4 in E111.
Is it class from two to three?
Well. Yep, good, wonderful. So we need 2 things, right? We need to do 2 things. Number 1, we need to update the status of the display variable in accordance with the behavior of a calculator. And number 2, we need to update the actual text box display component. So, I think I will give you a very small amount of time to write those 2 lines of code. See if you guys can hack that out based on what we've done previously.
What was the thing you wanted to do? Update the display?
And then update the text box. That one? Yeah, so text change means someone has entered text into the text box, right? Actually, now that you mention it, we should make it read only, shouldn't we?
It's in the behaviors.
There we go. So, on a real calculator, you can't just enter text into the screen. So I have set read only to true for this text box. So, here's how you do it. Remember that adding the digits to the display is simply concatenation. So, display is equal to display concatenate the number 1. Now, we need, well, not the number 1, the string containing the numeric character 1. Now we need to update the text box with it. TB underscore screen is equal, yeah, actually that's correct. But I'm still going to type it out. So there you have it. Now, as a special exercise, please take this code and adapt it to all of the rest of the numeric buttons. And if you're feeling extra ambitious, you could, at this point, probably figure out pretty easily how to make the clear button work as well. All right? So please take a minute to do that. Going on right now. I feel it will serve as a force. Oh, see, all I had to do was touch the mouse. There you go. Magic works. An awesome response. So, in general, it works. Yay! However, this is still not how a calculator usually looks, because it's left aligned, not right aligned. So, go into your properties, text align, right. Now it will look even more like a calculator. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. There we go. Very good. So, did you guys attempt the clear button? No? Well, take a moment, please, and attempt the clear button. Of course, the thing that the clear button is supposed to do is to delete the current contents of the display. Can I give you a hint? Double click on the name. No. No. So you don't have to click and drag this select, you can double click. So, the way that a clear button works very simple. Rather than adding to the display, we remove everything from it. Reset it to an empty string, and there you have it. So, now we need to talk about how things actually work on a calculator. So, this is where things get a little bit more complicated. So let's imagine we have a little bit of a program trace, all right? Display is here, and let's say that the button press is given here, right? So in this case, we're going to use a program trace to try to back calculate how the algorithm will work, right? So, if we start with an empty display, and then we press 1, 2, and 3, our display acquires values 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Right? Good. So here's the question. If we hit the plus button, what does it display on a standard calculator? Yes.
It doesn't normally display anything until you hit more buttons of what you're adding to it, and then it kind of blinks it up and starts.
Right. So here we have no change. We have no change in response to this button press. But for the next button press, we have a new number started, right? 4, 5, 6. So then we get 4, and we get 45, and we get 456. Right? So then, what happens when we press the equal sign? What do we get as our result? It's not a trick question.
123 plus 456. I'm not
Yes.
doing that.
So 5, 7, 9. Right? Very good. The sum of the two numbers. So, here's a question, right? If we are calculating the sum of these two numbers, when we are down here and the equals operation is called for, how do we know the number we are adding to the current number? What do we need to do to still have that value? Maybe someone else has it? Hey, I heard a whisper that might have been the right word.
Save it.
Yes! Yes! We need to save it to a
Integer or float.
variable.
Variable, yeah.
So you want to probably save it in the same format that this is, right? So it would be, in our case, a string. But yes, we need a new variable. Call it store. Right? So, so let's imagine that like store, we originally don't care what's in it, right? What happens when we press the plus button? What must we do for this value to be here, available here for this calculation? What must we do?
Input value into store.
Yes, we must copy the value in display to the storage. Now, as we go down, right? No change, no change, no change. And in fact, here we don't even have to worry about what the previous value is either, right? All that's useful to know is that once we get to the equal sign press, the value in storage is the previous value we need. Make sense? So far so good? So, question number 2. What else do we need to know in order to calculate this value? We have this. Oh, can I do that in red? Let me see. We know this, right? And we know this, but we need one other thing to perform the operation. And it's a bit trickier. Anybody have any ideas? We need one more piece of information to be able to calculate a value here. What do we need to know? Let me ask this a little differently. Does this behave the same if I hit minus? Right? No. Right? We need to know which operator button was pressed. That information, the same as this information, that information goes away if we don't keep track of it. Right? So we will need another variable. Thank you. So we need one more column. Operation. Right? So, similarly to the storage variable, it doesn't really matter what it is up front, but when we press the plus button, we need to store in some way the operation that we are performing. Right? Then, once we get all the way down here, well, in this case, you actually want to, you actually do want to store the fact that the last operation called for was an equal sign, right? So, because if you hit 5 equals 8 equals, the display will be, blank 5, 5, 8, 8, right? This equal sign is not performing an operation on 8 because the last operation was an equal sign, right? So, you will want to store which operation was last pressed no matter which operation that was, but this information is also necessary to calculate the end result. So we have our 3 pieces of data we need to perform the calculation. Make sense? Sound good? So, so I'll start you off by showing you the variables you need, and then perhaps you can add a bit of functionality to your buttons. This should take a little bit longer. So, there you have it. Please start with just addition and the equal sign, just those 2 buttons. If you get it working for those, then the other ones are trivial. They're trivial modifications of plus, right? Oh, one further note though. Because we've decided to store these values as strings, when it actually comes down to performing addition, the thing that you need to do is to convert those strings to integers before you, to actually perform the arithmetic, and then you convert them back into strings. Make sense? Good. Go to. So you don't have to do an on next button for the complete display if you're just a bit selective when you update the display, right? So in this case here, where there's no change, like the display variable itself would be cleared, but the display as displayed to the user is simply not written to. Yeah. You guys want me to put the chart back up? Would that be useful?
Jumping ahead, but the next thing would be to make, like, an answer variable, right? Display at the end, that would have to be a double.
Well, you can convert it and then calculate and then convert it back.
Okay. But it's still, when you use double variable, we're gonna get this.
Well, you'd have to convert it to a double and
Okay.
then convert it back to a string. String can represent double, right? This is the minimal set of variables necessary to do everything. But if you want to add another one, that's fine too.
I see what you're saying, you don't have to, but you can.
Yeah. Like, what's kind of interesting about this example is like, I'm almost straying into teaching you hardware, right? Like in technical point of fact, these three things would be registers inside of a CPU. Like a small, well, CPU, yeah, an arithmetic logic unit, right? Each one of these would be a register in hardware. The buttons would like map to certain circuits and like this, as like software examples go, this is a very hardware-esque one. Because, you know, a calculator is actually ultimately hardware. But yeah, that's, this is the minimal set that you need. But yeah. These things date back from when you needed like, you know, physical space for for registers and stuff. I mean, you still need physical space, but like when you're measuring your silicon and like the number of atoms it is across, it takes up almost like negligible physical space. So. smallest calculator in the world would be like so small that if you had 10,000 of them laid out next to each other, you probably still wouldn't be able to see them with the naked eye. It says it's requiring restarting the application. So if you save and then reload, save your project and then reload it in Visual Studio, that should go away. I'm saying it doesn't exist. So let's go back to this. That's right. Yeah, for yours. Pardon me. You didn't change the name, so for you it's still text box. Since there's only one text box, it's like, sure. Right? But if you ever have more than one, you should use a good naming convention. I know it's just going to be one of those mornings where you just don't get any marking done at all. Either that or everybody will have left, because they've been fired. I shouldn't make jokes. It's gallows humor, it runs in my family. Which string operation? Oh. That's what you said. You have to use logic. I don't know, maybe there's a function that does that, but see, the problem is, okay. It's a bit beyond us, right? But in theory, what you can do is you can have you could write an array, right, which contains math operation function references, right? And then you could have a mapping between elements of the array containing the symbols and another array containing the function definitions for each of those operations. And if you set all of that up, you could do it in one line, right? But our level, just use switch cases. If statements, also good. Excuse me, madam. This, okay, does it run? Could not copy. Because it is being used by another process. You already have it open. You already have it. Cool. All right. So time grows short. So I'll show you how to do it for plus. And you guys can adapt that for the other ones. Sound good? So, let's give plus a, what are those called? Actions. Give it an action. When we hit the plus button, we do not update the display. Unless you're you and you show the operator, which is also fine. But on this version, we didn't update the display. So, except to say that store is equal to the current value of display. Display is equal to an empty string, and no operation is equal to plus. There we go. That's all you require, actually. Very important, though. Make sure that you store the value in the display before you clear it. Otherwise, you will only store a cleared value. Because memory! Now, let's add some functionality to equals. So, the first thing that we need to do is we need to do different things based on which operation button was pressed. The easiest way to do that at our level is to use a switch case, actually. Switch on operation. Case, yeah, you got it. Plus, break. So, if we are adding two things, then our display is equal to store plus display. But of course, that's a numeric operation, and these are strings. So if we do it that way, it will be concatenated and not added. We need to convert things from strings to doubles. So, string dot what's the conversion method again?
Convert dot to double.
There we go, thank you. Of course, it now complains that the that your value is we're trying to write a double into a string slot. There are a couple of ways of converting to a string, but this is the simplest and easiest. If you take an empty string and concatenate it with some value, make sure this is in braces, of course. That will force string conversion implicitly on whatever this is. That's like the smallest way to do a string conversion. So there you go. Display is now that value. We will, in this case, still want to display the results, but we will want to display the results no matter which operation was performed, so we can put that outside the switch case. And we'll want to set the last operation performed to equal sign. There we go. Now, shall we test it to see if it works? One plus 1 equals 2. Ha-ha! 2 plus 2 equals, ooh. Well, that's interesting. Interesting. Okay, let's see here.
But it was 22, I think, right?
1 plus 1 equals 2. Oh, did it enter
Yeah.
22? Oh, okay. I must have clicked it twice. Yeah, 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay. Whew. Whew. Was worried there for a second that 2 plus 2 no longer equaled 4. Oh, what a world that would have been, hey? It's kind of funny. Sometimes in my code, just as like a little joke to myself, instead of doing like if I want an infinite loop, I don't say while true, I say while 1 is equal to 1. Because in theory, 1 should always be equal to 1. But if 1 ever stopped being equal to 1, I want to be the first to know. You know? So. Okay, so given that, hopefully you guys can adapt that to the rest of the operations reasonably easily. That's class. For practice at home, please complete the calculator. Okay? Sound good? Awesome. Question?
Equals this file.
I will most certainly. Not just this file, the whole solution. Yeah. Got it. What is this? There we go. Take her easy, folks.